In previous modules, we've discussed the value of industry organizations in creating markets for emerging technologies and positioned the InterWork Alliance as the place to be if you want to help tokenized services become as mainstream as Wi-Fi or mobile broadband. In this module, we will look under the covers of the Alliance to show how our members are working to make web-scale adoption of tokens a reality. The InterWork Alliance is very centered on using business requirements to drive standards development. At the beginning of the first series, we discussed your possible interest in doing something for the greater good, democratizing processes, improving efficiency and transparency, or ensuring customer confidence and trust. The Alliance begins its work at this point, the identification and study of use cases. The InterWork Alliance forms bodies for this effort called business working groups, and their mission is to study and document key industry use cases, market requirements, and performance metrics. Business groups are generally aligned to focus on use cases within particular global industry classification standard sectors or industry groups. If there is no current business group looking at an area of interest, the InterWork Alliance manages a process for members to propose and begin new groups. The Alliance is very much a member-led organization, and it is the membership itself that determines which business groups to form and which use cases to study. Each business group will work through a process of articulating and defining the elements of the use case under study. The starting point for this process is establishing the business specifications of the items of value within that use case that will be tokenized. In the previous series, we described how each token differentiates itself from other tokens by the way that it is classified, the properties it requires, the behaviors it exhibits, and contractual relationships it extends to the parties looking to interchange across it. Each business group goes through a systematic, workshop-like process to very clearly and cleanly articulate these elements of the tokens that will be part of the use case under study. After identifying the items of value that have a role in the use case and understanding the tokenized representation of these items that will be used, the group will then dig into the specific needs of each, answering questions such as, is the token interchangeable with others of its type? Can it be divided, or is it unique? How is it created, and is it ever removed or transformed? How will parties typically interact with the token? How is ownership maintained? Is there any data required within the token as part of its identification or use, such as a SKU or a serial number, and so on. Once every item of value in the use case is well understood and specified, the business group will then examine the sort of contracts that are expected to be written across the tokens and define these in a workflow-like format. Finally, any valuable insights that might be produced from an analysis of the shared data across these contracts are identified. When complete, this business-oriented output is taken in by the InterWork Alliance technical working groups to be turned into standards. Alliance standards are called frameworks, and there are 3 frameworks that manage the entire life cycle of a tokenized business process. You have already met the first, the Token Taxonomy Framework, which contains the components necessary to define standardized tokens that fit the requirements of all business use cases that have been studied by the InterWork Alliance. The InterWork Framework for the standardization of contractual interactions and the Analytics Framework for standardizing a means of deriving insights from shared contractual data have only just begun to be formed. The very first use cases studied by the business groups will help inform the process for how these frameworks will be built and maintained. The role of the technical groups, then, is to ensure that the frameworks can satisfy the business requirements that are passed along. If not, any missing components will be added to the appropriate framework or frameworks, example specifications will be built, and the updates sent back to the business group for validation. The InterWork Alliance frameworks are intended to be all-encompassing, meaning that they will, over time, support any use case from any industry. As more and more use cases are studied, it is entirely plausible that a complete set of standard specifications for the use case can be generated without any additions or changes required. We will conclude this series with a look at how this business-focused structure of the InterWork Alliance frameworks makes it easy for business requirements to be directly expressed.